Story 1. So, in February, I was flying for 27 hours to Bali on an airline based in eastern China. My flight was from Heathrow to Beijing, leaving at 10:30 p.m., so it was an overnight trip. Other than me, the only non-Chinese passengers on the plane were a theater group performing Singing in the Rain. I even swapped seats with a married couple from the group so they could sit together. That left me next to two young women in their mid-20s. We had a nice chat while waiting for takeoff, and once we were in the air, the lights dimmed, everyone reclined their seats and tried to sleep. I did the same, pulling my beanie over my eyes and getting ready to rest. Now, you're probably wondering where this is going, right? Behind me were an elderly Chinese lady and what I assumed to be her middle-aged daughter. There I was, cozy and ready to drift off, when suddenly slap. Then again slap, slap, slap. I was literally being smacked on the head repeatedly. At first, I just sat there stunned, thinking maybe if I ignored it, they would stop. But they didn't. After what felt like 5 minutes of this nonsense, I pulled my beanie up and saw the two girls next to me staring with wide eyes full of shock and disgust at what was happening. The elderly woman behind me was actually hitting me. Even when I sat up, she was still smacking me. What's a girl supposed to do in that situation? So, I got up on my knees on the seat, turned around, and pointed straight at her. In a loud voice, I said, "Hit me again, and I promise you, I don't care how old you are, I will not tolerate it." Then I pointed at her daughter and added, "And you, don't even think about joining in." They both looked shocked. They didn't seem to understand English, but I felt like my point got across because they started whispering to each other quietly. I turned back, and the girls next to me gave me high fives for standing up for myself. Then I rolled over and went back to sleep. But it wasn't over yet. The next thing I knew, a flight attendant was tapping my shoulder. At that point, I was just thinking, am I ever going to get some rest on this flight? I pulled up my beanie and asked her what she needed. Would you believe it? She said, "You need to put your seat up." I asked, "Why?" She replied, "The people behind you complained." Now, I sat up, looked back at them, then looked the flight attendant straight in the eyes and said very bluntly, "Their seats are reclined." Absolutely not. Then I pulled my beanie back down and tried to sleep again. When we finally departed the plane, those two women glared at me as if I had been the problem. The audacity of it all was unbelievable, honestly. Edit. For those of you commenting about the 5 minutes detail, no, I didn't have an actual timer running. That's just what it felt like while I was trying to sleep with a beanie over my eyes. When someone says, "I'll be 5 minutes," it doesn't mean they'll return at exactly 4 minutes and 59 seconds. It's just an expression for not long. Yes, this story is real. No, it's not generated by artificial intelligence. If anything, the repeated spelling mistakes in my original post should have been a giveaway that a human wrote it. This whole thread exists because situations like the one on that flight really do happen. It was ridiculous and outrageous, which is exactly why I shared it. But some of the angry comments honestly make me wonder, are there just frustrated people everywhere these days? Story 2. So a little backstory. I was an apprentice electrician a while back, and through my work met other companies. I got talking to this guy Chris, who owned an air conditioner installation and maintenance business. He often had people try and scam him like all construction companies do, but this one stood out. So Chris, the boss, was working on a major renovation to a small office building where pretty much everything would be new except for brick walls and frame. Being a small business and having good workers, Chris would only ever have to brief them on what needed to be done and answer any questions. This allowed Chris to go do quotes and check out other jobs, while Bob and Ross did all the hard work. Towards the end of the build, two of the co-workers, Bob and Ross, were fixing up the final touches on the air conditioner unit, while Chris was at a funeral, but was popping in later to check their progress. I can't remember the exact way Chris explained it, but the air conditioner was ducted and the vents weren't very visible, and to the untrained eye you couldn't even notice it. Well, the roof was finished hiding the ducting and everything on Bob and Ross' side was completed and only needed the electrician to hook up the power. In walks the entitled Karen. Karen was the manager for the company that was moving into the office and liked to think she was queen of the work site. She would constantly message Nolan, the site manager, over text and email to complain and argue about the work that had been done, and being a Karen, she knew more than the professionals. The kicker, she wasn't even permitted on site. How could the work be done? There's no vents. Actually, there are. They are. Bob tried to answer, but she cut him off. What's that horrible smell? You guys have stunk out the place. That's the smell of the paint, Ross answered her. No, one of you must have done something in here. Paint doesn't smell like that. There was more to this conversation, but to save time, Karen just kept complaining and claiming that Bob and Ross did not work. Things started to get heated when she was told that they couldn't even turn it on because the electrician hadn't had the chance to connect the power. Karen started screaming at them, saying things like she wouldn't pay them, no one would hire them, and that she'd have their business license taken away. Right in the middle of her tirade, Chris, the boss, walks in still in his suit from the funeral. Nolan, finally, it's a good time. These jerks are trying to leave after they wrecked the place and after not doing any work. A little curious, Chris doesn't correct her. Wait, what do you mean? What happened? These two refused to do the work, sprayed fumes in here probably to get high, and when I told them that they did not work, they told me to get lost. To be honest, I don't know why you would hire a bunch of scummy con men like these. I don't even think they have their licenses for air conditioning. Are you stupid? I know for a fact that's not true because I helped them do the work, and I helped them install the unit. Chris told her off. Don't try and lie, Nolan. You're just covering up for them because they're your friends. They may be my friends, but I'm their boss, and I'm not Nolan, you weirdo, but he did mention you. You're not allowed on this site and are in breach of contract. Get the heck out before I call your boss. Karen was just shocked and left in a huff, clearly shocked that someone would speak to her like that. Chris then called up Nolan straight away and explained the situation and also apologized for talking like that to a client. Nolan told him to not worry, and he'd sort it out. The week Chris went to the site because the power was back up, and he needed to test the units. At the site he runs into Nolan, who told him that he called the owner of the company moving in and told them that they were in breach of contract, entering a site without permission, and that he was in his legal right to stop work and demand for the full pay for the work, and he won't finish it. The owner started to get worried and started asking questions. Nolan explained about Karen and how he had to deal with constant harassment and was over it. After a few apologies and a promise of beer to make up for it, the owner assured Nolan that Karen wouldn't be allowed back, and if she showed up to call him so he could fire her. Chris was happy to hear it worked out, but was ecstatic that Nolan asked him to join him for a few drinks after the working day. Karen never returned. Story 3. So, I'm a mall guard. I'm the one who bans you when you get caught shoplifting and tells you that, no, you can't ride mountain bikes in the mall. Yes, this happened, and that's a whole other bizarre story if anyone is interested. I actually have a lot of stories that are both scary and funny. This happened about a week ago. I was pulling a 17-hour shift that included the overnight. The mall is guarded 24/7. About 11 p.m., I was doing a patrol around the inside of the building. We had some workmen doing maintenance work, and in one of the food court restaurants, and I had to keep an eye on them as well as my usual rounds. Walking into the food court, I was waved over by the night janitor. There were 2 cops with him. The only way in at that point was through a back entrance we had left open for the workmen. We've had some ongoing issues with the local department, and I was somewhat annoyed to see them just coming in again without trying to contact security first. But whatever. The police officer asked me about a silver truck with a light on the top, like a security truck, driving around the property. They knew it wasn't one of our security trucks, which are white. They also have large decals on the side that are hard to miss. I had no clue what they were talking about. I hadn't been outside in the last hour, so as soon as they left, I immediately double-checked that the mall was secure. It's an important part of my job to make sure no unauthorized vehicles or individuals are in the mall parking lot overnight, so after that I headed out. I found the truck quickly. I'd have called it dark gray rather than silver, but whatever. When I got up to the truck, there was a company name I'd never heard of. The name underneath that I assumed was the name of the guard himself and a phone number. I won't give any more details than that for obvious reasons. However, the security company was one I had never heard of and was in no way associated with the mall. I asked him if I could help him, and the other guard just lobbed the exact same question back at me. I informed him that I was mall security, that he was on private property, and I needed him to leave. The other guard told me that he, in fact, was security, which was a bit confusing to say the least. I again identified myself as mall security and informed the man that if he didn't leave the premises I would call the police. The other guard responded insisting that he was going to call the police and have me removed from the property for trespassing. At no time did he identify himself or give any reason for his presence on the property beyond insisting that he was security. He was extremely annoyed by my questioning and became increasingly combative and aggressive in his tone. He did not, however, at any time exit his vehicle, and I kept well back for obvious reasons. I'll pause here to say that I am female and on the short side. People generally judge me as being in my late 20s, although I'm a good bit older. This guy was a large man who I put in his late 30s or early 40s. So, while he didn't exactly say run along little girl and leave security to men, it was heavily implied by his tone and attitude. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. So, I called the police. It was about midnight at this point, but procedure is procedure. As soon as I got off the phone with dispatch, I had to call first my direct boss, and then the general manager to inform them of the situation. Neither of them knew why some guy from another security company would be there. The mall general manager, who will call Dave for the purposes of this narrative, said he wanted the guy off the property. The other guard shouted something I couldn't understand while I was on the phone with Dave, though the tone was aggressive. Dave could hear him yelling over the phone and said to stay well back. I agree entirely. By the time I got off the phone, the other guard had rolled his window up again and appeared to be on the phone himself. The police officer called me at this point. He asked if this was about the truck they had told me about. When I confirmed this, he told me that they had, and I quote, caught up to the driver, and that he had claimed to be private security hired by one of our anchor stores to watch it overnight. I called Dave with the information and also texted him the number on the truck. Calling the company, Dave was told that the store had indeed hired private security, without getting permission or even bothering to inform us. Before I go farther, yes, the store in question rents their individual space. If they had hired a guard to be within that space, I would have nothing to say to it, and neither would the mall. This isn't the case. In fact, the guard they hired isn't allowed inside their store. He was hired to watch it from outside, on property that is the mall's, not the store's. Individual stores are not permitted to use mall property beyond their rented space without prior authorization. It's in their contracts. After speaking to the company, Dave called me back. He said that the whole thing would need to be sorted out in the morning, but for that night the guard could stay. However, it was on sufferance, and he was to remain in his vehicle at all times, and to stay only in the parking lot directly by the store, not driving around the whole mall parking lot like the cops had seen him doing. I attempted to relay these instructions to the other guard. Although he did briefly roll his window down again, he continued to refuse to listen to anything I said. When I tried to speak to him, he talked right over me very loudly, saying he'd just talked to his boss and everything was fine, so I was to again run along. He seemed to like that phrase. I tried to insist that I needed him to listen to me, but he objected, saying that he didn't have to listen to anything I said. When I tried again, he just started talking even louder to drown me out, saying he didn't have to listen to me. Then he rolled up his window again and refused, point blank, to acknowledge my presence. In the end, I had to call the police officer back and ask them to inform the guy of Dave's instructions. In the morning, there was a huge hullabaloo about it. I don't know all the details, but the store manager had a long meeting with Dave. Also, a formal complaint was issued with the company in regards to their guy. A couple days later, I was asked by someone hired in their company to go through exactly what happened with her. Afterwards, she apologized profusely, and we have been told that the guard in question would be dealt with, whatever that means. We never saw that guard again. I'm writing this on my dinner break, and as I type, some other guard is currently sitting out the parking lot watching the store. I'll be honest with you, though. I honestly don't think the other guy ever actually believed that I was security. It was chilly at being October, so I'd thrown on a hoodie over my uniform. Still, when someone says they are security, involves the mall general manager and the police because you are trespassing, they might just be who they say they are. Story 4. I grew up in this tiny Michigan town where everyone knows everyone, but life took me away for a few years when I went to the police academy. When I came back 6 months ago as one of our town's newest officers, I discovered something interesting. Hardly anyone recognized me anymore. Our police force is small, just 10 active duty officers covering the whole area, and I got assigned to patrol the east side, even though I'm originally from the west side. The thing about small towns is that people get comfortable. They think they know exactly who belongs and who doesn't. What they don't expect is that the quiet kid who used to live 3 streets over is now carrying a badge and has the authority to arrest them. Our shopping mall becomes a complete nightmare at the end of every month. All the entitled people come crawling out of the woodwork, armed with expired coupons and bad attitudes. Even when I'm off duty, I make it a point to swing by the mall area just in case something goes wrong and backup is needed. My colleagues appreciate the extra eyes, and honestly, I've gotten pretty good at spotting trouble before it escalates. Last Tuesday was supposed to be my day off. I was doing some last-minute gift shopping for my friend's birthday when I heard raised voices coming from the front of the store. At first, I figured it was just another customer complaint that would blow over in a few minutes. But when I continued browsing, the voices got louder and more aggressive. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed the items I wanted and headed toward the checkout area. That's when I saw her, a middle-aged woman in a stained sweater, waving around a handful of what appeared to be newspaper clippings, screaming at a teenage cashier who couldn't have been older than 17. I positioned myself in the line directly behind this woman and kept my phone ready in case I needed to text my buddy who was on duty. The situation was escalating fast. Karen was yelling about how stupid the cashier was, demanding to know if she had even graduated high school. She waved her coupons around frantically, insisting that they covered various items and that everything should be 50% off, so her total should be much lower than what the register showed. The poor cashier was trying her best to stay professional, but I could see her hands shaking when she handled the register. She apologized repeatedly and explained that the coupon was expired and that even with the valid coupon, store policy didn't allow using 2 on the same purchase. Karen demanded to see the manager immediately. The teenage employee apologized again and explained that the manager was out at the moment, but offered to hold Karen's items if she wanted to wait for the manager's return. That seemed to be the breaking point. The woman started screaming even louder. She declared the situation unacceptable, complained that she had places to be, and demanded that the cashier just give her everything for free. The cashier apologized once more and explained that she couldn't do that. Karen then screamed for an older employee who could help her, someone with more authority. At this point, she actually threw her handful of coupons at the girl. They scattered across the counter, and some fell to the floor. The teenager looked like she was about to cry, and other customers in line were starting to stare and whisper. I couldn't just stand there and watch this anymore. I told Karen to calm down, pointing out that the cashier was just a teenager and that throwing things was just plain childish. Karen spun around and examined me like I was something she'd stepped in. She yelled at me not to talk to her that way and told me to mind my own business. I shrugged and decided to keep quiet for the moment. but I made a mental note that if she got physical again, I was pulling out my badge. The back and forth continued for another few minutes, Karen making the same unreasonable demands, the cashier apologizing and explaining the same policy over and over again. When it became clear that screaming wasn't going to get her what she wanted, Karen grabbed her bags and made a break for the exit. But here's the thing about entitled people, they always think the rules don't apply to them. When she rushed past the security sensors at the front of the store, they started beeping loudly. She hadn't paid for anything in those bags. She was trying to shoplift after throwing a tantrum about not getting things for free. Now, Karen might have been fast in her own mind, but she was actually a pretty slow, heavy-set woman who clearly didn't do much running. I caught up to her in about 5 seconds and tackled her right there in the parking lot. I read Karen her rights, telling her she was under arrest for shoplifting and explaining that anything she said could be used against her in court. She went from screaming about her rights to dead silence in about 2 seconds. Karen protested that I couldn't arrest her because I wasn't a real cop. I pulled out my badge and showed it to her, explaining that I actually was a police officer and that she had just committed theft in front of about 20 witnesses. I called my partner who was on duty, and he arrived within 10 minutes with a patrol car. We got the security footage from the store, which clearly showed her concealing merchandise and attempting to leave without paying. The manager, who had returned by then, was more than happy to press charges. While we were filling out the paperwork back at the station, my partner couldn't stop laughing. He joked that most cops have to go looking for trouble, but I just go shopping and it finds me. I told him, what can I say? I have a gift for attracting these situations. Karen ended up being charged with shoplifting and disorderly conduct. Turns out she had 3 previous incidents at other stores in the county for similar behavior. The judge wasn't particularly sympathetic to her excuses about expired coupons and rude employees. The teenage cashier's manager gave her a commendation for handling the situation professionally, and corporate sent her a gift card for dealing with such a difficult customer. Living in a small town where people think they know everyone definitely has its advantages when you're in law enforcement. Karen learned the hard way that you never know who might be watching when you decide to act like the rules don't apply to you. Story 5. This story was told to me by my dad, so this is all secondhand and some details may be missing. Background: my dad is Hispanic and looks it. Dark skin, brown eyes, and a mustache. He also takes pride in his appearance, and he looks like a refined cowboy when he dresses up. Straw hat, neatly pressed button-up shirt, black jeans, and spit-shine boots. He's very social and his work is his second family, so if there is a party, a convention, or any other kind of get-together, he will be there. Story time: pre-pandemic, my dad and his coworkers had checked into their hotel and decided to go to the lobby that had a taco bar set up for the guests. It had discounted margaritas, a live mariachi band for entertainment, and unlimited food. So it was perfect for my dad and his buddies to have dinner and relax after a long day. This was an informal gathering, so my dad was wearing his cowboy getup, and everyone who knew him knew who he was. He was milling around, making his rounds and making sure to shake hands and talk to everyone there. At one point, he went in line to the taco bar to have his dinner, and how he put it, a snooty woman who called herself the manager tapped him on the shoulder and started pestering him. "Karen, excuse me, sir. This bar is only for the guests." "Dad, I am a guest." "Let me see your key pass. This bar is for guests only, not the band members." And this is where my dad started getting mad. "Why should I show you my key pass? Why won't you look at my friends' key passes?" He pointed to his other, fair-skinned friends and called them out. "Why are you picking out the Mexican in the line and not the other white guys?" One other thing everyone knows about my dad is that he will be nice only once. Then he will get in your face if you keep pushing him. My dad tried to be polite at first, but once that stubborn Karen manager would not let it go, my dad decided to escalate the situation. Once he did not back down from this woman. She was the one who tried to apologize. but then my dad said the magic words. "I want to talk to your supervisor. I want to talk to him about your conduct." The woman's supervisor was called, and even though the man tried to cover for her, my dad was already pissed off and was not going to go quietly. He accused the woman manager and the supervisor of being racially insensitive, and kept asking why he was the only one being called out. Now, this was not the first time my father had been mistaken for a service worker, and he always believed in making the accuser so uncomfortable that they will keep him in mind next time they wrongfully profile another person. Now, he has the entire lobby and the rest of the guests listening in and most likely on his side, judging Karen and her supervisor. The supervisor was red in the face and was finding any way to de-escalate the situation. Finally, he apologized for the 50th time to my dad and asked if there was anything they could do to make this right. My dad seized this opportunity and said, "In that case, I would like to have my dinner at this taco bar for free, and I want my table to have free drinks all night." The supervisor was quick to jump at the chance to calm my dad down and satisfy the rest of the guests. My dad still tells this story, and even though he can get up on his high horse, this time it was warranted. My dad is and always will be the proud Hispanic cowboy who takes no nonsense from anyone, especially snooty Karens who run their mouths way too much. Story 6. I live in a small mountain village not far from a city in Australia, where COVID is under control and we don't often wear masks. During the week, it's a lovely, quiet, close-knit community. We're a bit of a tourist hotspot in the region, though, and weekends bring the crowds to the mountain. Most weekends, many of the locals spend their time working their gardens, keeping busy and away from the crowds. There's one street that has a lot of local infrastructure: council building, post office, library, church, rubbish tip, etc., where some tourists venture, but you're more likely to find locals. So this one lazy weekend morning, I'm on my way with my first load of garden refuse to the tip. I swing into the local coffee shop on the aforementioned street to put in a coffee order on the way through and pick it up on the way back. The coffee shop is usually busy, but this particular morning it is pumping. There are several tables of approximately 20 people, all ordering the big breakfast. I order 2 coffees, a couple of hot chocolates for my kids, and a treat for my dog. Then I'm out the door and let them know I'll be back after I run to the tip. When I return, I park on the opposite side of the road and run in to get my order. The place is starting to ease up as a couple of the big tables have just finished and left, plates awaiting cleanup. I stood not far from the barista and can see that my 2 coffees are in a takeaway tray awaiting the imminent arrival of the much-anticipated hot chocolates. 2 ladies in their mid to late 50s stand not far to my right. I haven't seen them around before and assumed they must be tourists. The fact that they were dressed up in what looked like cocktail dresses and heavily made up for a Sunday morning further added to that picture. One of the staff hustles past me on her first round to collect some of the plates when the first lady Karen bails her up. "I've been waiting forever. Where are my coffees?" A little taken aback, the young staff member regains her composure, gives a shy, polite smile, and explains that they have been very busy and that Karen's coffee would be coming soon. Unsatisfied with this, Karen points at my coffees and says, "Why can't I take those?" The young staff member patiently explains that these are someone else's coffees and that Karen's will be out soon. She then hurries off to commence her table clearing. As the young lass moves away, Karen turns to her friend with a look of shock and rage. "Did you hear how she just spoke to me?" Karen splutters. Her friend nods in a disapproving manner. "How dare she speak to me like that? So rude. I bet she's the owner. She has no right to speak to me that way. I want my coffee." Karen has caught the attention of the barista now, who is furiously trying to avoid eye contact. However, Karen can smell fear, and it's too late. Karen charges the coffee counter. She's going in for the kill. "Excuse me, that lady spoke to me terribly. Where are my coffees?" The barista looks at her with a mix of shock and fear and manages the courage to ask the raging Karen what her order was. "I ordered coffee, and now you're just being ignorant. I want my money back, now." I'm starting to get really pissed, and the rest of the staff are now aware of Karen's attack. The manager is in the store and pauses on her way out the door. She looks about ready to intervene as the girls behind the counter begin scurrying to figure out what Karen's order is and how much money they need to give her to make it all end. This isn't enough for Karen though. "Oh, for God's sake," she spits. "Just give me those." She jabs a painted fingernail at my coffees. The barista again explains that the coffees she is demanding were ordered by another person. Karen erupts, "Stop being so rude. What kind of place is this? All I want is my morning coffee and you treat me like this? I've been waiting for ages and..." By this point I have heard enough. I love the staff in our little local coffee shop, and they didn't deserve this kind of treatment. I stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, ma'am." Karen wheeled and brought her laser-sharp glare to bear on my calm and polite visage. "What?" she barked. "Those are actually my coffees, and these ladies do not deserve to be spoken to like that," I said calmly. Karen's rage turned up a notch as she began opening and closing her mouth like a startled fish. She threw an accusing finger to point at the staff behind the counter. "You didn't hear how they spoke to me. I don't deserve to be spoken." I calmly interjected, "Actually, I did hear how they spoke to you, and they were actually really polite. You're being really rude and honestly pretty entitled." Karen stared at me in horror. She threw her hands up and yelled, "Oh, screw this," as she turned on her heel and stormed out the door. Her friend remained waiting and watching with a wry smirk on her face. The staff all thanked me, loaded up my hot chocolates in the tray next to my coffees, and I went on my merry way. As I left, the manager thanked me by name, and I complimented her staff, explaining again that no one deserved to be spoken to that way. As I walked out the front door, I spied Karen on the island in the middle of the road, not 5 meters from my car. She was smoking a cigarette with her nose held high in the air in indignant self-importance. I internally braced myself in preparation for round 2. I wasn't disappointed. As I mounted the curb on the island, she spotted me and turned in my direction. "You need to mind your own business, mate," she snapped. I smiled pleasantly, not wanting to show her that I was at all fazed. "I hope to have a wonderful day." "Screw you," she hissed, jabbing her cigarette in my direction. And that was it. I finally snapped. I turned to look straight at her as I said, "Oh, screw you. You are a horrible human being and I hope you rot." Then I turned on my heel and walked to my car. I'm pretty sure she tried to say something else, but it fell on deaf ears. I hopped in my car and headed to the safety of my home, away from the angry Karen and the sea of tourists. When I got home, I realized that the girls behind the counter had written a big "thank you" on a 5th cup jammed into the tray. I popped open the cup, and they had given my kids 4 extra marshmallows. I was chuffed. I told my wife the whole story. She was shocked and had a good giggle because I never have angry words with people and am usually super polite. I downed my coffee and headed back into the yard to continue gardening.